Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, maybe good evening, depending where you are in the world. Thank you for joining us today, and I'm excited to be meeting with you guys on this month's webinar to talk about going big with Adobe Sign. A couple of housekeeping notes. This webinar is 30 minutes long. We will record this, and you'll get a copy of this webinar early next week to review and share with any colleagues who might be interested. Additionally, if you have any audio issues, there is a sound icon on the left side of your screen at the top. Please make sure that that is colored green. If not, you may have to reconnect your audio. And finally, if you'd like the slides to be bigger so you can see the content more easily, there are some arrows on the right side of your screen that will make those slides full screen for you. And with that, let's jump into the content. If this is your first time joining the Adobe Sign Innovation Series, I wanted to give you a brief overview. We do run this webinar every month. It's usually the first Thursday of the month, although sometimes it's not, depending on holidays and other obligations. We also like to encourage conversation and collaboration. So you'll see poll questions, Q&A pods, and other things pop up throughout the webinar. And finally, we also encourage live video from our presenters, which today is me. You see me up here in the top left-hand corner of your screen. This is to kind of, take away that disembodied voice that many webinars have and give you guys a view of who we are here at Adobe and what we do. This point of the webinar I would usually pass on to our presenter, but I am today's presenter. I'm Joe Klinker. I'm the Product Marketing Manager here for Adobe Sign. My job is to help all of our great customers understand our product, make sure they're using it the most effectively, and share some best practices and strategies with you guys to better leverage Adobe Sign. And so today, I wanted to talk through 3 different topics. Deployment best practices, or how we here at Adobe view and have learned from our best customers about deploying Adobe Sign in an organization. Onboarding and enabling new groups. As you bring in new groups, what are the best practices for bringing those groups on and making sure that they're ready to go. And finally, end user enablement and education. Your end users are the ones who really execute and get things done in Adobe Sign. How can you best enable and educate them on the product? Let's jump into it. Here at Adobe, we have a couple of ways that customers deploy the Adobe Sign technology. A lot of customers begin as a line of business specific deployment. That means a specific department like sales or procurement, HR, or legal begins with Adobe Sign to solve the business challenges in that department. Other departments may or may not have their own deployments of Adobe Sign, and if they do, they're entirely separate from your department. This allows those specific business challenges to be solved, but it does become more difficult to govern, especially if you think about corporate compliances and other security settings and initiatives at an organization. It is a little bit disjointed. And so what we actually see more and more of our customers doing as they grow and they discover more capabilities of Adobe Sign is centralized deployment. And this is deployment of Adobe Sign that's managed centrally, often in an IT or operations role, where maybe they also own other shared software like Microsoft Office or Adobe Acrobat. And they actually work with the different departments to deploy in those departments and organizations. This centralized deployment model allows for easy group onboarding because it's all managed centrally by one organization in the IT world. It also encourages more of that corporate control, governance, and builds one specific owner of the reporting of the entire deployment of Adobe Sign. And one important thing to note as well in this situation is that each individual group define their own security, privacy, and access settings. They define their own document templates and workflows. So each group can still work in Adobe Sign as if they have their own deployment, but it's managed centrally by their IT department. And we'll talk more about the things that group managers can do with their deployments in a little bit. As you go on, we actually see more and more companies treating their departments like centralized departments as well. If you think about an HR organization, you have teams for rewards, for recruiting, for facilities. Your EMEA team may be structurally separate from your North America team or have different requirements. And you actually can leverage the Adobe Sign group model to better enable these different sub-departments to be their own organization as well. Again, users will only have access to the settings and documents assigned to their groups. And this allows the HR executives to really see how HR is performing by group and by function. So how do we do this using groups in Adobe Sign? What we really recommend is to pre-plan your group strategy. And a couple best practices here. Be finite. Don't overcomplicate the number of groups or the types of groups. You don't want to have too many that are not utilized correctly. And it's important to always note that while you can create as many groups as you like, and you can rename them, you can remove all users and add different users, you cannot delete a group once it is made in the product. So you can obviously change that function. You can delete all of the content within the group, and you can use it for a different part of your organization, but you can't remove the group from the system. We also encourage you to consider a naming convention. The groups auto-sort by name, so you can kind of really start to see more scalability as you grow the number of groups. It also allows you to more quickly pull reports. And as the account administrator, you have access to pull reports by group, by user, or by the entire account. So here's a view of the actual reporting tab inside of Adobe Sign. And you can add in one or multiple groups. In this case, I've added in the entire HR organization across North America and EMEA. Or you could just do one group. You could do it by user. Or you can just do everything all at once. It's important just to know you guys can, as account admins, really start to see what's happening in the organization across any group. Other uses of groups to consider as you build out your deployment. If you're using our API or an integration maybe into Workday or Salesforce, consider putting that entire integration into one group so you can report upon that group the most effectively. Storage is also another big conversation. Different groups may have different places they want documents to end up. You can define that by group, and we always encourage our customers to consider integration to a system like Box or OneDrive, etc. And finally, workflows. Our workflow functionality can be defined at the account or group level. So you, as the account admin, can build workflows for one or all groups. And actually, group administrators and group managers can also build their own custom workflows for their group. While it's really easy to build out and systematically implement in groups, another thing you have to consider is how do we convince these different groups to get on board? How do we convince departments to come on board? And one really important way of doing that is really showcasing ROI and communicating effectively. So share your transaction milestones. As different groups come on board, as you get your first use cases off the ground, show what's happening to the rest of the organization. We have a great tool called the Adobe Resource Calculator, and this actually will tell you the specific impact your transaction volume has on the environment. How many trees are you saving? How much water are you saving? It's a really great tool to kind of give more tangible, I guess, feedback about how this Adobe Sign tool is impacting your company's environmental initiatives. And as you bring these groups on board, make sure you understand what they're saving. Help them baseline their current initiatives, their current time wasted on paper processes, build those savings, and then you can actually use that to build your internal champions. Once you have those internal champions, they're going to be your advocates across the rest of the organization to say why those groups, those departments should consider Adobe Sign. I also strongly encourage you to leverage your internal communications team, if you have one, to showcase what's happening with this digital initiative and any company communications you may have. And finally, one really great way to really enable easy access and setup is posting those instructions and those best practices on an internal website. This eases kind of the explanation of the product and the benefit to each group. So on the right here, I'm showing off a little bit of what the state of Hawaii, who's one of our customers, this is their site to help state employees and actually constituents too see what the eSign technology is helping achieve in the state and hopefully help do groups find value and get on board more quickly. So when you're onboarding and enabling new groups, what are some key things to consider? This is kind of the section where I would say, here's how you should be talking to interested groups to help them kind of see the process, the benefit, and what they can and can't do inside the tool. So we have about a 5-step process that we encourage all groups and departments to kind of go through. And these are just ways to think about the implementation, think about the project, think about the team involved. I'm going to walk through each of these topics individually and give some best practices of what we've seen from our most successful customers. First, defining your goals and objectives. So a new department coming on board, the first thing to really do is understand the current state. Understand the different inefficiencies in the departments, understand where the time is being spent or time and money are being wasted. Just get a really good baseline of how things are now. This will help you later on when you're trying to prove success and ROI. It's good to document all of this. If the members of this group, the users, the recruiters, the salespeople had more time, what could they do? Could they take on some projects that maybe had been on the back burner? Would there be more time for optimization or personal growth? Could they recruit more employees more quickly or maybe close more deals more quickly? What is really preventing these teams from becoming more efficient? And how can you track those things so that later on you can report about what they've achieved? And all of this comes down to measuring success. How will each individual group measure success? What would success mean for them? And making sure we make it personal for those groups. Assembling your team. So we have a few roles that we encourage every new group to have set up before they really get going. The first is, of course, that group administrator. This is a functional role in the product and also kind of a role in the organization as well. This is someone who manages day-to-day group operations. Think someone in sales operations or HR operations. They're the ones who are going to be going into the Adobe Sign tool, adding in users, organizing users, and just making sure that everyone is set up the way that they need to be set up. This also is probably going to be your main point of contact in the group. So you'll be working closely with the group admins and less so with the actual end users, ideally. We also encourage you to have a backup group admin, to let that group admin go on vacation sometimes. But also this person is going to be well-versed in the technology as well, and they can assist in scaling the Adobe Sign product across the organization. Think about how in HR there's multiple different groups within HR. This person can really help drive strategy and implementation across more functions. The project manager is also very important. In some cases, this is the actual group admin, that they have those skills. There also may be a second person. But they're really going to be working on keeping the project on track, organized, and also reporting against goals and KPIs. And finally, an executive sponsor. This is maybe your head of HR, head of sales, someone who kind of has that organizational power to remove roadblocks or make a mandate, send a communication out to really encourage the adoption of the tool. They're also going to be very passionate about reporting and ROI. They're going to want to know the numbers, want to know what we're saving, what time we're getting back, and where that time and money is now going given the Adobe Sign product. This person also could be one of your champions to tell this story to other departmental leads to help get other groups on board as you think about going even farther across the organization. So then you start selecting the actual processes that you're going to be moving to digital processes. So this is, we don't want to go too big all at once. We want to kind of take this methodically and take it slow. So really what we ask our group admins to do and group managers to do is think about where is the team spending most of their time? Where are we spending most of our money? What's costly in our process? And what it comes down to is where is the paper? Where are we storing our documents and how do they get there? When are my reps or my recruiters going to the printer? When are my signers going to the printer? You're really helping to find those processes, find the paper, and then you can use that to build a list and start to tackle those processes one by one. And thinking of one by one, this is when you start to involve your project manager. We really, again, encourage you to approach the project slowly. If you bite off too much or take on too many projects all at once, it's going to reduce your effectiveness. What we really encourage is actually to build a backlog. Have that list of processes, have the list of things you want to change, and maintain that backlog and take them on one by one. Another really important part of this plan is change management. So all of your end users, all of the recruiters or salespeople, they're used to doing things one way, and we're asking them to change that way they do it now. So we really want to make sure that we're open to feedback, we make adjustments, and we over-communicate to these users to make sure they're comfortable with the changes. And finally, communication, especially with the executive sponsor. We want to make sure that he or she is constantly informed about what we're doing and how it's going. And that's when that baseline you established in step 1 becomes important, because now you can track the ROI and track against the success of that organization. And then finally, implementing that project. We could strongly encourage new groups to consider framing it as a pilot with a specific process or team, and taking it slow with that process or team. That also will help you find your champions, find your power users, make them successful, and they can help you as you continue to deploy across that team or organization. And I'm going to keep talking about listening and documenting and taking feedback. It's really important to be always learning from these processes, because you can use that learning and those challenges as you approach new teams or new processes that are being digitized. And finally, never consider yourself done. You're always going to be testing and editing. No process in Adobe Sign is ever set in stone. So as you learn more or develop more champions, try and find those ways to continue to improve. I also strongly encourage you to consider using Adobe Sign's advanced features like widgets, Mega Sign, and Workflow Designer to get even more value out of the department and have even more opportunity to digitize processes that maybe are quite long or quite heavy. So what are some best practices for that group admin, that group manager? One thing to keep in mind is that similar to the account admin, this group manager can report either by the entire group or by user within the group. So you can assess your group's transactions, or you can look at a user or multiple users. If you have a couple of recruiters whose main focus is sales rep hiring, maybe you want to look at their data versus the other recruiters in the organization, and you can do that as a group admin. You also have a lot of power as a group admin to modify group settings and customize those for your specific departmental needs. So you have a lot of power, a similar amount of power to the account admin even, and we encourage each group to kind of customize as they need to make their group effective. And one of the really cool ways you can do this is actually you can apply your own branding. So if your HR team has a specific brand or logo that they use, be sure to use that within the tool and make it kind of your own space. So here's that reporting tab again. This is now me as a group administrator, and I can select each user or all users or a number of users to report against. So now that you've gotten the groups on board, how do you make sure that the end users across your organization are enabled and educated on the product, what it can do, how to use it? You don't want them getting stuck, because the more that they get stuck, the less they'll go to that tool to solve their problems, and they'll revert to old practices and habits. So a couple of tactics you can use to help end users get up to speed on Adobe Sign. First, we have a really robust Adobe-led training program. Every week we run hour-long webinars to train end users on all of the features and functions that they can leverage inside of the tool. I have the registration link right here. I encourage any new user or even any new admin to go and take this training just to get up to speed on kind of the core functionality of Adobe Sign. Next, we have in-product assistance. So we want to make sure that we're offering help while you're in the product. There's a guided help tab on the right sidebar of the Adobe Sign home, actually every page in Adobe Sign, that has in-product walkthroughs and also allows you to directly search the Adobe Sign Learn and Support page, which we call HelpX. My team is always constantly looking for new walkthroughs and new things that customers get stuck on to build out more guides, and we're going to constantly be improving that process for you guys ongoing. And finally, speaking of HelpX, I strongly encourage you all to visit the HelpX page linked here. We got tutorials for all of our features and functions in the product, really good guides. We have a designer on our team who builds all of these great video tutorials to really just make sure you understand all of the functionality of Adobe Sign. Great way to get started. One specific end user feature I want to talk about is account sharing. And this is the concept of me as a user having access to another user's account and also letting that user have access to my account. This is a really powerful feature because it helps you scale, and it helps documents not get stuck. The use case would be if I'm on vacation and I'm hiring for a role that needs to be, a document needs to be sent, my cover for the week, log into my account and send the document on my behalf. Another use case for this is that you could have a central persona or user for all documents to be sent through. So maybe you want all documents to be sent from, Acme Corp HR. All of your recruiters could then share with that account and send those documents through that user, so they're all in one spot. I strongly encourage you, if this is a tactic your groups want to use, to define that up front and implement that as users come on board, so it's kind of the status quo and not something you try and plug in later on, although, of course, you can do it at any point in the lifecycle. And finally, there is another feature called advanced account sharing, and this kind of takes that sharing of accounts to the next level, and it is something that I strongly encourage you to talk to your CSM about, because the use cases here are numerous and way too many to cover in this one webinar, but I wanted to call it out as an option for you guys. So that's all I've got in terms of some best practices around deployment. And I wanted to spend a little bit of time before we get to our Q&A talking about some upcoming events that we have. Some of you who have been around for quite a while may remember last year our Adobe Sign Community Gathering series. These are live events where we really encourage customers to come together, meet each other, teach and learn from other, or to other in some cases, Adobe Sign customers. Our customers like to network, and we like to encourage that. We also bring in members of the Adobe team to help get your questions answered. Myself or others who are kind of on the Adobe side and have some information for you, we want to make sure you have access to those people. These events are really intended to give you tangible and actionable plans to grow adoption, grow use cases, expand at your organization. Lots of really key and I think interesting takeaways for you to bring back to your companies. We're having 6 of these in the US starting in April. We're having 3 in Europe. And then later on in the fall, we'll be going to visit our friends in Asia Pacific and Japan as well. So feel free to visit this link and sign up for an event in a city near you coming up this spring. A couple other resources for you guys as well. A lot of people ask the question all the time around global e-signature law, and the laws are always changing. And we've built a great document to help kind of keep you abreast of all of the changes, what you need to know each country. So if you're trying to deploy in a different region, I encourage you to visit this URL and see what the laws are like over there. I've mentioned your Customer Success Manager a few times. If you aren't sure who this person is, this link here, number 2, will help you get in contact with that person. The Adobe Sign Insiders Network, this is our online community of customers. This is kind of a place for you to come and learn the latest and greatest information, assess new use cases or ideas, and really get up to speed on what's possible, and also network with other Adobe Sign customers. So I strongly encourage you guys, if you haven't already, to sign up for the network and come visit us. And finally, this last link, you're obviously here right now, so you've been you know the innovation series, you've just experienced it. If you're looking for old content, we have about 18 months worth of content on this link right here. We've been running this program since 2018, the beginning of 2018, and all of that saved content is here. This is also where we'll be posting the registration page for next month's innovation series, which is going to be happening on the first Thursday of April. And we'll be covering the upcoming Adobe Sign 10.3 release. We do have a new release happening in the May timeframe. So in interest of keeping you informed of changes and new features, we'll talk about that in April. And that will be my colleague, Mike Prisman, presenting. With that, I'm going to go ahead and open up a couple of final questions. I know we're close to the half-an-hour mark here. Want to get your feedback and also any topics that you'd like us to cover in this session. We're always looking for new ideas and things that you guys want to learn about, so please feel free to submit that feedback below. And if you have any questions regarding anything I talked about today, please feel free to submit those in the left question box, and I'll answer those right now. I do see a question in there right now about a limit to how many users a customer can have. And that does depend on your contract. So I would encourage you to talk to your CSM and see your contract. It does vary quite largely for different types of customers. So that's definitely a good question for your CSM. I see a second question that's coming in around best practices and training for templates. Templates is a great topic. I think that we are going to add to our list of topics to cover in this webinar series later on. The question you asked, Barry, is relatively specific, so I would really encourage you to bring that up with your CSM. They can definitely give you a better answer than I can, and even sit down with you and look at your specific use case and make sure that we're answering the question correctly for you. All right, everybody. If there are any more questions, please feel free to submit them. If you don't submit them, I'm going to assume that I did a good job covering all this content. In the interest of giving everyone some time back before your next meeting, I'll go ahead and end the audio portion of this webinar right now. Just keep in mind that we will send you the recording early next week, and we encourage you again to visit any of the above URLs, get more engaged with the community, and ask any more questions that you have. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you next month about Adobe 10.3. Thanks a lot.